Once upon a time, in a vast empire that stretched across deserts, mountains, and rivers, there lived a mighty king. His throne was carved of gold, his palace walls glittered with jewels, and his army could silence entire nations with the sound of its march. To the outside world, he was a figure of power, feared and respected. But within the walls of his palace, he was known for something darker, his heart was harsh, and his pride was endless. This king, known as Badshah Zalim, had 7 daughters. Each of them was unique, each carrying her own beauty, intelligence, and grace. They were the jewels of the palace, yet they lived under the shadow of their father's cruelty. He had no son, and in his heart, he considered daughters a weakness, not a blessing. Whenever he looked at them, he was reminded that his empire would one day pass into uncertain hands. This bitterness made him cold, and his daughters felt the sting of his distance every day. The eldest daughter, Zainab, was wise beyond her years. She often told her sisters, "Father's anger is a storm. If we keep our hearts pure, perhaps one day, the storm will calm." The second daughter, Amina, was gentle and compassionate, always tending to the poor secretly through the palace servants. The third, Fatima, was known for her sharp wit and courage, she dared to speak truth even when silence seemed safer. The fourth, Khadija, was deeply spiritual, spending hours in prayer, finding solace that her father could not give. The fifth, Ruqayya, was lively and filled with laughter, brightening even the darkest corners of the palace. The sixth, Maryam, loved poetry and would often write verses of hope. And the youngest, Safiya, still a child, looked up to all her sisters, unaware of the full weight of their father's cruelty. One evening, as the crimson sun dipped below the horizon, the Badshah gathered his daughters in the grand hall. His voice boomed, echoing against the marble pillars. "You are 7 daughters, but no son. Tell me, why should I not consider you burdens? Tell me, what worth have you in this empire of mine?" His question pierced their hearts, yet each daughter responded with courage. Zainab, the eldest, stepped forward. "Father, a daughter is not a burden. A daughter is light, and with light, an empire thrives." The Badshah laughed bitterly. "Light? What use is light when enemies surround us? Only a sword can protect, only a son can lead." But the daughters did not bow to despair. Fatima raised her chin. "A sword may protect, father, but wisdom can save nations. And wisdom is not bound to sons alone." The king's eyes burned with rage. "Do not speak to me of wisdom, girl. You know nothing of ruling." Yet deep inside, though he refused to admit it, their words stirred something. For all his cruelty, he could not ignore the fire in his daughter's eyes. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The Badshah's empire faced unrest. In the far provinces, the people began to rise against heavy taxes and unjust rule. Rumors of rebellion reached the palace, and for the first time, fear crept into the king's heart. His generals advised harshness, his ministers whispered strategies, but none brought peace. It was then that Zainab, bold and unafraid, approached her father. "Allow me to speak with the people," she said. The king roared with laughter. "You, a woman, what can you do that my army cannot?" But rebellion grew stronger, and in desperation, he allowed her. Disguised in simple clothes, Zainab went among the people. She listened to their grievances, their cries of hunger, their despair under the crushing taxes. She returned with a heart heavy but determined. "Father, they are not enemies. They are your people. Show them mercy, and they will give you loyalty greater than fear ever could." The Badshah scoffed, but something in her words lingered. Meanwhile, Amina, the second daughter, continued her secret acts of kindness. One night, dressed as a commoner, she slipped out of the palace with food and gold for the poor. Safiya begged to follow, and Amina agreed. They walked the narrow streets of the city, where children slept hungry and mothers wept in silence. Amina placed bread in the hands of a starving child, whispering, "Remember, mercy is greater than power." Safiya's young eyes widened, the memory etching itself into her soul. But their act did not remain hidden. A guard reported their secret charity to the king. Furious, the Badshah thundered, "How dare you go against my rule? Do you not see, kindness makes me weak?" This time, it was Fatima who stood tall. "No, father, kindness makes you strong. For when hearts are won, swords are unnecessary." The Badshah raised his hand as if to strike her, but he stopped. Something unseen restrained him. For the first time in years, doubt whispered in his mind. The empire's troubles worsened when drought struck. Rivers dried, crops failed, and hunger spread like wildfire. The king commanded his ministers to hoard grain for the palace, leaving the people to suffer. The daughters wept at this cruelty. One night, Khadija, the fourth daughter, prayed with such sincerity that her sisters felt the air around them tremble. "O Allah," she whispered, "open father's heart, for only you can turn stone into flesh." That very night, the Badshah dreamt a strange dream. He saw himself standing in a barren land, surrounded by his starving people. They looked at him with hollow eyes, and his crown grew heavy until it crushed him to the ground. He awoke drenched in sweat, shaken to his core. The next morning, he softened slightly, allowing food to be distributed under the daughter's supervision. For the first time, the people praised not the king, but his daughters. The king heard their voices, filled not with fear, but with love. It unsettled him. As months passed, the empire began to heal, but the king's pride fought fiercely against the lessons pressing upon him. He wanted to believe that only his power sustained the throne, yet time and again, it was his daughters who brought peace where his armies had failed. One day, rebels from a distant province marched toward the capital, determined to overthrow the tyrant. The king prepared for war, but his daughters begged him to reconsider. Fatima spoke firmly, "Father, give me leave to meet them, unarmed." The king was outraged. "You will be killed," but Fatima was unshaken. "If my death saves thousands, let it be so." Reluctantly, he agreed, watching his daughter ride out with trembling hands. Fatima faced the rebels not with weapons, but with words. She spoke of mercy, of justice, of change. She admitted the cruelty of the past, but promised hope for the future. Her courage disarmed their fury, and slowly, the rebels laid down their arms. They returned not as enemies, but as allies. When news reached the king, he was speechless. His daughter had achieved in hours what his armies could not in years. That night, as he sat alone, the words of his daughters echoed in his mind: light, mercy, wisdom, kindness. He looked at his hands, once so steady in cruelty, now trembling with the weight of realization. He had built an empire of fear, but his daughters had built an empire of love. The youngest, Safiya, unaware of the gravity of it all, climbed into his lap and said innocently, "Father, do you see? We are not your burden. We are your blessings." Tears, for the first time in years, filled the Badshah's eyes. He embraced his daughters, all 7 of them, and in that moment, the palace walls seemed to glow with a light unseen before. From that day, the empire began to change. The king still wore his crown, but he no longer ruled with cruelty. His daughters stood beside him, guiding, advising, softening his heart each day. And though the people still called him Badshah, they whispered a new name too, the king whose heart was saved by his 7 daughters. And so, in the grand palace once ruled by fear, kindness bloomed, and the story of 7 daughters became a tale told for generations, a reminder that true strength lies not in power, but in compassion.